The day my daughter called me a monster didn't begin like anything special. It was cold, gray, the kind of morning where the sky feels heavy even before anything happens. I remember adjusting the sleeve of my coat as I walked into the office of the law firm, trying to steady my breathing, telling myself this was just paperwork, just another step after his death. I was wrong. We were seated around a polished oak table in a quiet conference room. The lawyer was speaking in that careful, measured tone professionals use when they don't want to trigger emotions. I barely heard him. My eyes kept drifting to my daughter, Lena, sitting across from me. Her posture was stiff, her expression unreadable. And then, suddenly, everything shattered. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. Papers flew, literally flew, straight into my face. I didn't even flinch in time. They hit my chest and slid down to the table. "You're disgusting," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough to echo in the room. "You think I don't see it? You probably got rid of him just to get everything." Silence. No one moved. Not the lawyer, not his assistant, not even the man sitting in the corner pretending to review documents. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting for a reaction. But I didn't give them one. I stood up slowly, smoothing my coat like nothing had happened. My hands were steady, surprisingly steady, considering my heart felt like it had just been torn open. I looked at Lena for a second, just a second, and then I walked out.
No shouting. No tears.
At 59 years old, I had learned that sometimes dignity is the only thing you're allowed to keep. 3 days passed after that moment. 3 long, suffocating days. My phone rang constantly the first evening, unknown numbers, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, even neighbors pretending concern. By the second day, it all stopped. Silence replaced curiosity.
People avoided me.
Curtains shifted when I walked past houses. Conversations died when I entered a room. It's funny how fast a person can become a story instead of a human. By the third morning, I stopped expecting anything. That's why the knock on the door didn't surprise me. 8:12 a.m. I remember checking the clock. 2 officers stood outside. One young man, one woman slightly older, both wearing that same neutral expression I had seen on doctors, lawyers, and now police. Professional. Controlled.
Distant.
"Emily Carter?" the woman asked. I nodded. "We need to ask you a few questions." "Of course you do," I thought. I stepped aside and let them in. "Would you like coffee?" I asked, already turning toward the kitchen. They hesitated. That wasn't the reaction they expected.
People expect panic. Fear.
Denial. Not hospitality. We sat in the living room. The same living room where I had spent decades pretending everything was normal. Same couch. Same curtains. Same silence that had always filled the space, even when it was full of people. "Your daughter filed a report," the male officer began. "She believes you may have been involved in your husband's death." There it was, said out loud. Strangely, I felt calm. "Did she mention," I asked quietly, "that he had staged for liver cancer?" The woman officer glanced at her notes.
Yes.
"We're aware of his medical condition. Then you already know how he died." She didn't respond immediately. "There are concerns about medication handling," she said carefully. "Possible irregularities." I let out a soft breath. Not quite a laugh, but close. Instead of answering right away, I reached for an old photo frame on the shelf nearby. Lena was 6 in that picture, missing her front tooth, smiling like the world was simple and safe. I was standing behind her, my hands on her shoulders.
He was next to us too, smiling. Perfect.
"Children see what they need to see," I said slowly. When Lena was little, she saw her father as a hero. When she got older, she saw him as someone who protected her. I looked at the officers. She never saw the rest. They exchanged a quick glance. "I didn't kill my husband," I continued. I took care of him until his last breath. I told them things I had never said out loud before. How I fed him when he couldn't hold a spoon. How I stayed awake through nights when he couldn't breathe. How I cleaned, medicated, carried, endured. And how he still managed to criticize everything I did, even at the end. Are you saying he was abusive? The woman asked carefully. The word hung in the air like something forbidden. I stared at the floor for a moment. I'm saying, I replied, that my daughter never really knew him. They stayed for over an hour. Questions, details,
Dates.
every answer I gave felt like peeling away layers I had spent decades bearing. When they finally stood to leave, the woman paused at the door. Is there anything else we should know? I hesitated. So many things. Too many things. But in the end, only one came out. Tell her. My voice almost broke, but I caught it. Tell her I'm sorry she didn't get the father she deserved. After they left, the house felt even quieter than before. I sat alone, staring at nothing, listening to the faint ticking of the old wall clock. That sound used to drive me insane. Now it felt like the only proof that time was still moving, because everything else felt frozen. But deep down, I knew something had already started. Something irreversible. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. And for the first time in years, it was finally starting to surface. The next morning, I found myself standing in the attic, surrounded by boxes I hadn't opened in years. Dust floated in the air, catching the weak sunlight that slipped through the small window. I didn't come up there often. Not because I forgot what was there, but because I remembered too well. Every object in that space carried a version of me I had tried to leave behind. Still, I knew exactly what I was looking for. It wasn't labeled, wasn't meant to be found easily. I had hidden it carefully, pushed far into the corner under the slanted roof, where no one, not even him, had ever bothered to check. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled the box toward me. For a moment, I just stared at it, my chest tightening with something between fear and exhaustion. Then I opened it. Inside was my life, the real one. Not the polished version people saw. Not the one my daughter believed in. The truth. There were medical papers, hospital visits with explanations that never quite matched the injuries. A fractured wrist from falling down the stairs. Bruised ribs from losing balance in the kitchen. I remembered every single one of those moments, not as accidents, but as consequences. Beneath the papers was a small notebook, worn and faded. I flipped through it slowly, recognizing the coded entries I had written late at night, when I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. Dates, short phrases, symbols only I understood. It was the only way I could hold on to reality when everything around me tried to rewrite it. At the bottom of the box, there was an envelope. I froze. I hadn't touched it in over 15 years. My name wasn't on it. Hers was. Lena. I picked it up carefully, as if it might fall apart in my hands. I remembered the night I wrote it. I remembered sitting on the bathroom floor, back pressed against the door, trying to stay quiet while he shouted in the other room. That night had been worse than most, not because it was the most violent, but because something in me had almost broken. I truly believed I might not survive until morning. So I wrote that letter, not to explain everything, but to leave something behind. A truth. A warning. A piece of me she could hold on to if I was gone. But morning came. It always did. And like every other time, I cleaned up the mess, hid the evidence, and continued pretending. I never gave her the letter. The sound of the doorbell pulled me back into the present so suddenly that I nearly dropped it. My heart jumped, and for a moment I just stood there, frozen, listening as it rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone. I quickly placed the letter back into the box, closed it, and made my way downstairs. When I looked through the peephole, I recognized her immediately. Detective Morales. She stood alone this time. I opened the door. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her tone calm, almost casual, but her eyes were observant, sharp. She hadn't come by accident. Of course not, I replied, stepping aside.
Come in.
This time, I made tea instead of coffee. I don't know why. Maybe it felt quieter, more honest somehow. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight filling the room in a way that almost made it feel normal. Almost. She didn't waste time. Yesterday, she began, you mentioned protecting your daughter from knowing who her father really was. I'd like you to explain that. I stirred my tea slowly, watching the ripples instead of looking at her. Have you ever loved someone enough, I asked, to let them believe something that isn't true just so they could be happy? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. My husband was different depending on who was watching, I continued. To everyone else, he was kind, respected, generous. At home, he was someone else. Abusive, she said quietly. This time I nodded. Yes. Saying it out loud still felt strange, like I was breaking a rule I had followed for most of my life. But never to Lena, I added quickly. I made sure of that. I explained how I learned to read him, his moods, his triggers, the subtle shifts in his tone that told me what was coming. I became good at stepping in, redirecting, absorbing the impact before it could reach her. It wasn't something I planned. It just became my role. Why didn't you leave? She asked. There it was. The question everyone always asks, as if it has a simple answer. I tried, I said. And for the first time in years, I told someone the full story. How I packed our things when Lena was 7. How I took what little money I could and left while he was at work. How we made it to my sister's house across the country, thinking we were finally safe. And how he found us. He came with the police, I said quietly. Told them I was unstable, that I had taken his daughter without permission. And they believed him, she said. Yes. Of course they did. He had the reputation, the charm, the perfect image. I had nothing. So you went back. I had no choice. I looked at her then directly. He made sure I understood that if I ever tried again, I would lose my daughter forever. She didn't write anything down for a moment. She just watched me. And you never told Lena any of this? I shook my head. She loved him. He made sure she did. He gave her everything, attention, gifts, affection. And I paused. I became the strict one, the difficult one, the one she blamed when things felt wrong. Detective Morales leaned back slightly, processing everything. And now she thinks you killed him. A small, hollow smile crossed my face. Yes, I said. After everything, that's what she believes. There was a long silence. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and turned it toward me. Do you recognize this? I leaned closer. It was a photograph of a handwritten note. His handwriting. If anything happens to me, it read, look closely at Emily. She's not who you think she is. My chest tightened instantly. Of course. Even at the end, he was still controlling the story. He wrote this about a month before he died, she said. Your daughter found it. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly tired. He knew he was dying, I said. He just didn't want me to live peacefully after he was gone. She studied me carefully. We're also looking into some financial activity, she added. Large withdrawals. Accounts that don't match what we expected. I frowned slightly. I don't know anything about that, I said honestly. He handled all the finances. She nodded slowly. That's what it looks like. Then she paused, her tone softening just slightly. Your daughter is coming in tomorrow for another interview. My heart dropped. And I think, she continued, It's time she hears the truth. No, I said immediately. Too quickly. Too instinctively. She can't. Emily, she interrupted gently, she has accused you of murder. I closed my eyes. I know. The truth is your only protection now. After she left, I didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, I went back upstairs. Back to the attic. Back to the box. I opened it again, this time without hesitation, and took out the envelope with Lena's name on it. It felt heavier than before. For years, I believed protecting her meant silence. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe love didn't mean hiding the truth. Maybe it meant finally letting it be seen. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair by the window, the same place where I used to wait for him to come home, listening for the sound of his car, trying to guess what kind of night it would be. Old habits don't disappear just because the person is gone. They stay in your body, in your thoughts, in the way your chest tightens at certain sounds even when there's no reason anymore. The envelope with Lena's name rested in my lap, its edges worn from time, from hesitation, from years of choosing silence over truth. I must have read it a dozen times before sunrise, every word carved into my memory like something permanent, something that could no longer be undone. When morning finally came, it didn't feel like a new beginning.
It felt like a deadline.
At exactly 9 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I didn't need to check who it was. I already knew. Detective Morales stood there again, her expression softer this time, but still focused. She noticed immediately. You didn't sleep, she said. No, I answered simply. I think I'm done avoiding things. She followed me inside, and her eyes quickly landed on the box sitting on the coffee table. I had brought it down from the attic earlier that morning. For the first time in decades, I wasn't hiding it. That's everything? She asked. 37 years, I replied. More or less. She sat across from me, but before I could open the box, she raised her hand slightly. Before we go through this, there's something you need to know. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. We've been looking deeper into your husband's finances, she continued. We found a separate account, one you didn't have access to. I frowned. That didn't surprise me, but it still felt like another layer of something I never fully understood. There were regular transfers, she said. Large ones. Over many years. I let out a slow breath. He controlled everything. I barely had access to grocery money without explaining where it went. She nodded, as if confirming something she already suspected. There's more, she added. 2 weeks before he died, he updated his will. I looked up at her. And he included statements suggesting you were neglecting him, possibly even mistreating him during his illness. For a second, I didn't react. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Of course he did, I said quietly. He was always planning ahead. She studied me carefully. There's one more thing, she said. I didn't like the pause that followed. He contacted someone from your past. An old acquaintance. Daniel Hayes. The name hit me like a sudden drop in temperature. I hadn't heard it in decades. Daniel? I repeated, my voice barely steady. That's not possible. He reached out about 3 months before his death, she explained. We have the emails. I stared at her, my mind already connecting the pieces. He was building something, I said slowly. A story. She handed me a folder. Read. My hands felt heavier than they should as I opened it. The messages were short, formal, but the intent behind them was clear. My husband introducing himself, expressing concern about my mental state, asking questions about my past, my behavior, my relationships. And Daniel, his replies were cautious at first, polite,
Confused.
until the last message. I read it twice, then a third time. He had defended me. After all those years, he still saw me clearly. I closed the folder, my chest tightening, not with fear this time, but with something else. Something unfamiliar. He tried to make sure no one would believe me. I said, "Yes," Detective Morales confirmed. "And he was preparing your daughter to believe the same." I nodded slowly. Then, without another word, I opened the box. One by one, I laid everything out on the table. Medical reports, photographs, the notebook, evidence of injuries explained away as accidents. Years of quiet documentation no one had ever seen. She didn't interrupt. She didn't question. She just watched. "Why keep all of this?" she asked finally. I thought about it. At first, survival, I said. Then proof. I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. "And Lena?" she asked. "She was never supposed to see it." Silence filled the room. Then she said something that made my chest tighten again, but in a different way. "She's at the station right now." I froze. "What?" "I want you to come," she said. "It's time." "No," I said immediately. "That's not a good idea." "Emily," she said gently, "this is already bigger than what you want or don't want." I looked at the envelope in my hand, the one with Lena's name. For years, I believed I was protecting her. Now, I wasn't sure anymore. "Okay," I said quietly. The police station felt colder than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally. The kind of place where everything is exposed, whether you're ready or not. Detective Morales led me down a hallway, past closed doors and quiet conversations I couldn't quite hear. Each step felt heavier than the last. "She's in there," she said, stopping in front of a door. My heart started pounding. Does she know I'm here?
No.
Of course she didn't. Nothing about this was going to be easy.
We walked in.
Lena was sitting at the table, her back to the door. I recognized the tension in her shoulders immediately. She always held stress the same way I did, tight, controlled, ready to snap. When she turned and saw me, the reaction was instant. "What is she doing here?" she snapped, standing up. "I'm not talking if she's here." "You should sit down," the other detective said calmly. "I'm leaving." She grabbed her bag, but Morales stepped slightly in the way, not aggressive, just firm. "You're not under arrest," she said, "but you need to hear this." Lena's eyes shifted between them, then landed on me. The anger was still there, but now there was something else too. Uncertainty. "Whatever she told you," she started. "Lena," I interrupted softly. "Please, just listen." Something in my voice must have reached her,
Because slowly she sat back down.
I took the seat across from her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the detective placed a folder on the table. "These are medical records," he said. "Your mother's." Lena frowned. "Why would I?" He opened it. Photos slid into view. Her expression changed instantly. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something closer to fear. "No," she whispered. This isn't real." "It is," I said quietly. She looked at me, really looked this time. And for the first time in years, she didn't look angry. She looked lost. "Your father wasn't who you think he was," I continued. "No," she said, shaking her head. "He wouldn't, he never." "He never did it to you," I said. "Because I didn't let him." Silence.
Heavy. Crushing.
The detective continued explaining. Financial control. Isolation. The false narrative he had been building. The note he left behind. Piece by piece, the version of reality she believed in started breaking apart. "And your father's death," the detective added, "was consistent with his illness. There is no evidence of wrongdoing." Lena didn't react right away. She just stared at the table, at the photos, at the truth. "Then why would he write that?" she whispered. "Because he needed control," I answered. Even at the end. Her hands started shaking. All those times, she said slowly, when you got hurt, I thought it was your fault. I didn't answer, because there was nothing to add. That's what he wanted, I said finally. The room fell silent again. Then the detective stood. We'll give you two some time. The door closed behind them, and suddenly it was just us, mother and daughter. Truth between us. Years of lies collapsing. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice breaking. I looked at her, because for the first time, I had no reason to hide anything. I thought I was protecting you, I said. She wiped her face quickly, frustrated. I accused you of killing him. Yes, I said gently. She looked at me like she expected anger.
Hate.
Something. But I felt none of that. Just exhaustion. I don't know how to fix this, she said. I reached across the table slowly. This time, she didn't pull away. Maybe we don't fix it, I said. Maybe we just start from here. Her fingers tightened around mine. And in that moment, something shifted. Not healed, not forgiven, but different. For the first time in years, we were finally seeing the same truth. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the same kind of silence we used to have. Before, silence meant distance, tension, things unsaid pressing between us like walls. Now it felt uncertain, fragile, like something new trying to exist but not knowing how yet. Lena sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the city moved past us in slow motion. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary, afraid that if I looked at her too long, whatever had shifted between us back at the station might disappear. When we pulled into the driveway, neither of us moved right away. The engine stopped, but the moment lingered. I could feel her thinking, hesitating, deciding something. Finally, she spoke. Can I come in? Her voice was quieter than usual, stripped of its usual sharpness. Of course, I said. We walked to the house side by side, not touching, but closer than we had been in years. The door opened with the same soft creak it always had, but everything inside felt different now. The air, the space, even the light, it all seemed unfamiliar, like the house itself was unsure of who we were becoming inside it. Lena stepped in slowly, her eyes moving across the room. I watched her take it all in. The furniture, the walls, the photographs that had once told a very different story. I used to think this place was perfect, she said. I didn't answer right away. It looked that way, I said finally. She walked further in, her fingers brushing lightly against the back of a chair, then the edge of the table, as if grounding herself in something real. Her gaze stopped at the wall, where the family photos still hung. Smiling faces.
Frozen moments.
A version of us that never truly existed. They feel fake now, she said. Not entirely, I replied. There were real moments in between everything else. She turned toward me. I don't know what's real anymore. That hurt more than anything she had said before. Then we figured out, I said quietly, together. She nodded, but I could see how heavy it felt for her. We moved into the living room, and she sat down on the couch, her posture no longer defensive but still tense, like she didn't quite know how to relax. I took my usual seat across from her, though it felt strange now, like we were sitting on opposite sides of something that no longer existed. I want to understand, she said after a moment. Everything. Not what they showed me, but what actually happened. I took a slow breath. Where do you want me to start? The beginning. Of course. I leaned back slightly, letting the past come forward, not as something to hide from, but as something to finally face. I met him when I was 23. I began. I was working at a bookstore downtown. He came in one afternoon looking for something specific, and I helped him find it. He was confident, charming, the kind of person who makes you feel seen immediately. Lena listened carefully, her eyes fixed on me. He asked me out that same day. I continued, and I said yes. Were you happy? She asked. At first, I said honestly. Very. I told her about the early days, the dinners, the laughter, the way he made everything feel easy. How quickly things moved. How everyone around me approved. How I believed I had found something stable, something safe. And then, she asked. It changed, I said. How fast? Faster than I realized. I explained how it started small. Comments about my clothes. Suggestions about who I should spend time with. Quiet corrections that didn't feel dangerous at first, just controlling in a way I didn't question soon enough. The first time he hit me, I said, we had only been married 3 months. Lena flinched slightly. I almost stopped, but I didn't. He apologized, I added. He always did. That was part of it. She looked down at her hands. Did you believe him? Yes. I let out a quiet breath. That's how it works. You believe them because you need to, because the alternative is too big, too overwhelming. The room felt smaller as I spoke, like the past was filling the space around us. And when I got pregnant with you, I continued, everything became more complicated. Her head snapped up slightly. He didn't, she started. He didn't hurt you, I said immediately. Never. He was careful about that. But you? I nodded. Yes. She swallowed hard. I don't understand how you lived like that, she said. I didn't think of it as living, I replied. I thought of it as surviving. That word seemed to settle heavily between us. And leaving, she asked. Why not keep trying? I told you about the first time, I said. After that, it wasn't just about me anymore. I explained the threats, the control, the certainty he had created that I would lose her if I tried again. How convincing he was. How complete his image was to the outside world. He made sure no one would believe me, I said. And I was part of that, she whispered. I shook my head. No. You were a child. But I chose him, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Over and over again. You chose what you knew, I corrected gently. What we both allowed you to see. She stood up suddenly and walked toward the wall of photos again. This time, she looked closer. I remember this, she said, pointing at one. My graduation. He bought me that bracelet. I thought you were just being strict when you said it was too expensive. I hesitated. That was the day after he broke 2 of my ribs, I said quietly. She froze. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. I was standing there in pain, I continued, and he was smiling for everyone else. She turned slowly. I had no idea, she said. I know. That was the hardest part. She sat back down closer this time. When he got sick, she said after a moment, did you feel free? The question lingered between us. I thought about it carefully. I felt tired, I said finally, more than anything else. She studied my face. But you still took care of him. Yes. Why? I met her eyes. Because I made a promise. And because I'm not him. That seemed to reach her in a way nothing else had. We sat there quietly for a while after that. Not uncomfortable, just processing. I don't know how to fix what I said, she admitted. You don't have to fix everything at once, I replied. We just start here. She nodded slowly. Then, after a pause, she did something small, but it meant everything. She reached for my hand. This time, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't unsure. It was intentional. And I held on to it. Because for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was losing her. It felt like I was meeting her again. The next morning felt different, not because everything was suddenly better, but because something had finally shifted into motion. For years, my life had been about enduring, surviving, staying still enough not to provoke anything worse. Now, for the first time in decades, there was movement. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. Lena was already in the kitchen when I woke up. I could hear the soft clink of a cup against the counter, the quiet rhythm of someone trying to exist carefully in a space that still didn't fully belong to them. I paused in the hallway before stepping in. It struck me how strange it felt to hesitate in my own home. She looked up when I entered, and for a split second, I saw the same uncertainty mirrored in her face. "Morning," she said. "Morning." We stood there awkwardly for a moment, like strangers trying to remember how to behave around each other. Then she gestured toward the coffee pot. "I made some," she said. "I think it's okay." "I'm sure it is." I poured myself a cup, and we sat across from each other at the table. The sunlight coming through the window softened everything, made it easier to breathe. We didn't talk much at first, but the silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was neutral, a space that didn't hurt. "I was thinking," she said eventually, wrapping her hands around her cup, "about the house." I looked up. "What about it?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It still feels like him," she said. "Every room, every corner." I knew exactly what she meant. "He chose everything," I said. "The furniture, the layout, even the colors." She nodded. "Can we change it?" The question was simple, but it carried more weight than it sounded. "Yes," I said without hesitation. Something in her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Not all at once," she added quickly. I think it would help." "It will," I said. And for the first time, I realized I wanted that too. We started small. That same afternoon, we moved things around in the living room. It wasn't anything dramatic, just shifting furniture, opening space, letting light reach places it hadn't before. But even that felt like rewriting something, like taking control of a space that had never truly been ours. At one point, Lena stopped in the middle of the room and looked around. "It already feels different," she said. "It does," I agreed. Not because the room had changed that much, but because we had. Later, we sat on the floor surrounded by things we had taken down from the walls. Photos, decorations, objects that once meant something but now felt misplaced. "What do we do with these?" she asked, holding up a framed picture of the three of us. I looked at it for a long moment. "We don't have to throw everything away," I said. Not everything was a lie. She studied the photo. "I don't know how to look at it anymore," she admitted. "Then don't," I said gently. "Not yet." She nodded and set it aside. We worked quietly after that, sorting things into piles: keep, store, let go. It wasn't just about objects. It felt like we were sorting through years of memories, deciding what still belonged to us and what didn't. At some point, she spoke again, her voice softer. "I keep thinking about all the times I got angry at you," she said. "All the things I said." I didn't interrupt. "I thought you were controlling," she continued. "Cold. Like you just wanted to make everything harder." I let out a small breath. "I know. But you were just trying to keep things together," she said. "Yes." She looked at me, her expression tight with something close to regret. "I don't know how to deal with that." "You don't have to figure it out all at once," I said. "It took years to get here. It won't change overnight." She nodded slowly. "I just wish I had seen it sooner." I shook my head. "You saw what you were supposed to see," I said. "That wasn't your fault." She didn't argue this time. Instead, she reached for another object, a small decorative clock that had once sat on the shelf. "It stopped," she said, noticing the frozen hands. I looked at it. "I stopped winding it," I said, "a while ago." She turned it over in her hands. "Do you want to start it again?" I thought about that for a moment. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "I think some things are better left still." She seemed to understand. We continued working until the room looked almost unrecognizable, not empty, but lighter, more open, like something had finally been released. That evening, we sat outside on the back steps. The air was cool, but not cold, and the sky was clear in a way it hadn't been for days. Lena pulled her knees up slightly, resting her arms on them, staring out at the yard. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I admitted. She glanced at me. Does that scare you? I considered the question. A little, I said, but not in the same way as before. How then? Before, I was afraid of things getting worse, I said.
Now,
I think I'm just afraid of doing this wrong. She gave a small, almost surprised smile. Me too. That made something in my chest ease slightly. We'll probably make mistakes, I said. Definitely, she replied. But we'll know they're ours, I added. She nodded. That's new. We sat in silence after that, watching the sky slowly darken. It wasn't the silence of distance anymore. It was the kind that comes when words aren't necessary, when just being there is enough. After a while, she spoke again. I don't hate you, she said quietly. I looked at her. I know, I replied. I just didn't understand you. That's okay, I said. I'm still figuring that out myself.
she laughed softly at that.
Fair. Then, more seriously, she added, I want to try. Try what? This, she said, gesturing lightly between us. Whatever this is now. I felt something shift again. Not dramatically, but enough to matter.
Me too, I said.
She leaned back slightly, looking up at the sky. It's strange, she said. Everything feels broken, but also clearer. That's what truth does, I said. It doesn't fix things right away. It just makes them real. She nodded. I think I prefer real. I smiled faintly. So do I. We stayed there until the air grew colder and the light completely faded. And for the first time in a long time, going back inside didn't feel like stepping into something heavy. It just felt like going home. 6 months doesn't sound like a long time when you say it out loud. It's just a number, a small stretch of days on a calendar. But when you've spent decades living one way, even a few months can feel like an entirely different lifetime. That's what these 6 months became for me. A quiet transformation I didn't fully notice until I stopped one morning and realized the house no longer felt like a place I had to survive in. It felt lived in, chosen.
Mine.
And hers. Lena moved in officially the week after everything came out. At first, she said it would be temporary, just until things settled. But neither of us defined what settled meant, and over time, the questions simply stopped coming up. Her presence became part of the rhythm of the house, her footsteps in the hallway, her voice on phone calls, the soft music she played in the evenings while working. It didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like something that had always been missing, finally returning. We changed things slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of care. Every decision felt intentional, like we were rebuilding something piece by piece instead of tearing it down all at once. The heavy furniture he had chosen disappeared gradually, replaced with lighter pieces we picked together.
Colors changed.
Spaces opened. Even the air felt different, as if the walls themselves were learning how to breathe again. One morning, I noticed sunlight reaching a corner of the living room it had never touched before. I stood there longer than necessary, just watching it, realizing how small changes can shift everything. Lena noticed too. It's brighter, she said, walking in behind me. It is. She smiled, not wide or exaggerated, just real. I like it. So did I. Our routine formed naturally. That night, we sat outside again, like we had months before, but everything felt different now. The air was warmer, the garden alive with colors we had chosen together. Flowers he would have never allowed were blooming freely, messy and bright and unapologetic. I've been thinking about the money, she said after a while.
I glanste her.
What about it? I don't want it to just sit there, she said. Or be what he intended it to be. I understood immediately. What do you want to do? She hesitated for a second, then spoke with quiet certainty. I want to use it to help people, she said. Women like you. People who don't have anywhere to go or anyone to believe them. Something in my chest tightened. Are you sure? I asked. Yes, she said. I've been thinking about it for weeks. Legal support, housing, counseling, the kind of help you didn't have. I looked at her, really looked at her. You've already thought this through. She nodded. I want it to mean something. It does, I said. It already does. She smiled slightly. I was thinking of a name, she added. Something simple. What? Second light. I repeated it quietly. Second light. It's not about the past, she said. It's about what comes after. I felt something settle inside me. That's perfect, I said. We sat there in silence after that, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something steady, something grounded. After a while, she reached over and took my hand. I see you now, she said. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. I held her hand gently. I see you too. And for the first time, those words didn't feel like something we were trying to convince each other of. They felt true. The house behind us was no longer a place of echoes and control. It had become something else entirely, a space shaped by choice, by truth, by the quiet work of rebuilding. The past didn't disappear. It never does. But it no longer defined everything. As the evening settled around us, I realized something simple, something I had spent years unable to believe. Some things break. Some things survive. And some things, if you're willing to face them, can be rebuilt into something stronger than they ever were before.